Here's what it's going to look like when it's done. Firstly, there's the header we made in the last lesson, automatically added to all pages. Then a nice big hero header area. There's an image showing a beautiful eco-friendly home, which is the picture of the success the prospect wants to achieve. Then there's a big headline and a subhead. In one suite, this is identifying the prospect problem, if you remember from Module 2. And also, at the same time, the solution that this company can help them achieve that success. The call to action button right now is just find out more. So that is a softer call to action than the main one, which is to book a call. My thinking here is that the prospect might not be ready to book a call just yet at this stage. So let's lead them gently further into the site. And that's why this button isn't the contrasting orange used in the header button. That's not to say we couldn't have the main call to action here. Totally depends on the site and the service and lots of other things. I've just made this decision right now. Under that, 3 boxes corresponding to a service each. I'm not sure if services are better here or instead we should have 3 what I call value propositions, meaning 3 separate benefits of the Green Building Company's service. I'll leave it just as services for now, and the dummy text is fine for now as well. Notice this whole section is pulled up and sitting on top of the bottom part of the section above it. Next, we have the 3 easy steps. So those are steps from the place the prospect is at now to the place they want to be. People tend to think that the path to the success they want is complicated and arduous and they can't really visualize it. But if we can break it down into really simple steps, it suddenly seems more manageable in their mind. Now this technique of showing people the simple stepping stones, 1, 2, 3, is really simple but powerful. And notice it closes with a nice big unmissable main call to action, book a call. Following that, a testimonial. Notice there's a photo of real people and the big headline is a major benefit. Remember the prospect's problem? They want to save money on energy bills. This testimonial doesn't say the Green Building Company are really awesome guys. That's all about the company. That's not what we want. It says the Green Building Company solved our problem. Big difference. Our real-life testimonials are really powerful. Prospects can see that other people have had their problems solved too. It's not just the company promising it. It ends with a button to view more case studies. A button because it's more obvious than a text link. But I haven't made it our contrasting orange colour. I've just made it dark grey. It's not meant to shout for as much attention as the main call to action. And finally, the footer, which we made in the last lesson. Let's see how this page was made. I already built this page design, so I won't be building it step by step from scratch. I'll reverse engineer it and tell you how I made it. Quick look at the top hero header area first. So I first added a new section, just 1 column. Now on that column, I actually set the padding right to 40%. You notice I have it set to percent here. And so what that does is it adds 40% spacing inside the column on the right here. That basically replicates the effect of having 2 columns. It's like this one is at 60% and then there's an imaginary one at 40%. It just keeps the text over to the left. Well then in tablet mode, I actually set the padding to be 0 all round, which now effectively makes the column fill all the available width. There's no spacing inside it. Back to the desktop. I added a background image to the section. And that's so this image always fills the full width of the screen. The image I added was 1800 pixels wide, and it's not a magic number, but it's just nice and wide, but it's not too huge, but it's going to slow the page loading speed down. I set its position to be top center. That's kind of the best position for the image to sit. The attachment is just default. It scrolls naturally with the rest of the page. Repeat, I set to no repeat. I don't want this image repeating over and over again on larger monitors. And size, I set to cover. That ensures it fully covers the available size and shape of this section, no matter what the screen size is. Oh, and just come down here in typography. I set the headings and text all white. So again, all I have to do is set those colors once in the section settings. Now note, you can do this in the column settings too, if you like. But for me, I need to apply this to the whole section anyway, so I did this in the section settings. This is a heading widget, set to H1. I increased the font size a bit in this widget's typography settings. Underneath it is actually another heading widget. But this time, I set it to be a paragraph rather than a heading number, and I tweaked the size a little bit too. I do sometimes like using the heading widget for paragraphs. You know, if I don't need all the fancy formatting like bold and italic and all those other things. Then here's a button. Fairly standard styling. Just one thing to point out in style. Come down to border radius. Now I set the border radius to 30 pixels. Now that's a lot of border radius. Well, this makes this button's corners really nice and rounded, which is what I wanted. Now I had to set the height of this section as well. Now there are various ways of doing this. For this, I use padding on the section to create the height of the section here, adding more space at the top and bottom of this section. Now I especially needed more padding inside at the bottom, and that's to accommodate these boxes being pulled up into the space, overlapping. I'll show you how to do that when we look at those boxes next. So in this section's Advanced tab, after some trial and error, I went with 120, 30, 280, and 30. So it's the same 30 pixels left and right as I used in the last lesson. And then 120 pixels at the top. That's a really nice, generous use of space. And then 280 at the bottom, which leaves loads of room for the boxes to sit in and overlap when we get to that bit. I'll quickly show you what this section looked like before I added that padding when the padding was 0. So if you see, the section is only the height of the columns and the text inside it. That's it. The background images don't provide any height of their own. I'll reset that padding back now. So 120, 30, 280, and 30. Let's preview that. Looking good. Right, now to those services boxes. So with the services boxes, I added a new section, 3 columns this time. There are no gaps between these columns, so I set columns gap to no gap in this section settings. I added a background color to each column. Now the box here is each column. You click the column settings and then set the background color under style. Then into the column, I dragged an image widget, a heading widget, a divider widget, a text widget, and a button widget, and styled all those. I treated these Find Out More buttons with a muted color, not our main contrasting orange color. In the column settings, I set padding, so that's the nice generous use of space inside each box, meaning inside each column. Now to pull the entire section up over the first section. Now doing this is a great way to draw the eye and to keep the visitor working down the page. And to pull something up, we need to add a negative top margin to it. So on this entire section, come to Advanced. The margin settings are in there. Now margin is space outside things. If I add a normal top margin, a positive margin, look, he's adding space to the outside of the section. He's pushing it away. So we want the opposite. So if instead I add a negative top margin, I'll use the down arrow on my keyboard. It now does the opposite. So it pulls the section up instead. I'll go with minus 100 pixels. And that's why we needed all that extra bottom padding on the section above. Move on to the 3-step section now, showing the prospect the stepping stones as the easy path from where they are now to where they want to be. It's just a 3-column section with a heading widget. This is an icon list widget. Now here's a little trick. Because the icon list widget doesn't have any text formatting controls like bold and italic and things like that, firstly, I actually created all this text in a text editor widget first, so that allowed me to easily create the line break and the bold formatting, the link. Really easy to do that in the text editor widget. Then I added the icon list widget and copy-pasted each block of text from the text editor widget into each icon list. And that retains the formatting, the bold, the links. Then I deleted the text editor widget because I no longer needed it anymore. And then here's a button widget, nice and big, with our contrasting orange color because it's our main call to action. We ultimately want the visitor to book a call with us, a one-to-one consultation. Then the testimonial. This is just a 2-column section, again with the text color set to white in the section's typography settings. This time I gave the section a gradient background. My gradient goes all the way from our darker green to a lighter green from our palette. The image of the couple is just an image widget, and the rest of it is just basically text and a button. I did set a few negative bottom margins on these widgets to tighten everything up. There was a little bit too much space under each widget by default, but another solution instead would have been, in a column settings, notice this widget space setting. By default is 20 pixels. Now, if for just this column, I only wanted 10 pixels space under each widget, not 20, I could have just set 10 here instead. I went with the negative margins because I'd done that before I remembered this widget space setting. And then we're at our footer. Finally, I checked responsive previews for tablet and mobile, tweaked a few settings accordingly, so it all looks good in both. I'm not going to go over that here. One more quick preview. This is nowhere near the perfect homepage. As I mentioned right at the start, one reason we're building this site now is just so we have a website to add our funnels assets to later on, our landing pages and callouts and things like that. But notice it is fairly minimal, and that's on purpose. It's not trying to do the job of the entire site. The main thing it's doing is making it clear what the company does and how it can help me, the prospect, and my problem.